A major summit is underway in the UK where 200 countries are being asked for their plans to cut down carbon emissions by 2030. This is seen as crucial if climate change is to be brought under control. This and other environmental issues will be examined on this edition of Green Angle. Welcome, I am Esther Mapariola. Climate change is a common concern for all countries, and it is an urgent and potentially irreversible threat to humanity. British Deputy High Commissioner in Lagos, Nigeria, Mr. Ben Llewellyn-Jones, said this during an art exhibition on climate change, with a renewed call for countries to move away from fossil fuels and embrace sustainable energy solutions.
With temperatures rising, storms raging, and the global impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, building back a fairer, greener, and more resilient recovery and safer economy should be the priority of all governments across the globe. To this end, world leaders will converge on Glasgow for the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference to solve the climate challenges. In a build-up to the Conference of Parties scheduled to hold in a few weeks' time, a non-profit organization is mobilizing everyone across Nigeria to act for climate change. And it has listed art as the fastest tool to reach the goals for a greener and cleaner world.
The 4 goals are depicted in all of these paintings. We have 17 paintings divided into 4 categories. So we are actually asking them that they should intensify action as they are going to be sitting during the COP26. There is no time anymore.
So the painting is saying that instead of just reading through the news, flipping pages on your newspapers, why don't you do deeper into this news? Why don't you look beyond what you see, so that you can see things that are actually happening around you and make a move before the move actually takes you.
Nigeria is the largest number of people in the world who don't have access to energy, certainly affordable energy. So we need to address that challenge. But the second thing we need to do is to make that sustainable. And actually in a place like Nigeria, looking at solar renewables, looking at wind, looking at the ways in which we can have sustainable energy is a very sensible thing to do. And fossil fuels, absolutely, we should be leaving them in the ground, but what we shouldn't be doing is leaving people behind who need access to energy too. So we're committed to helping with transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy.
Some change agents and activists believe more action is needed in the fight against the climate crisis to prevent the likely extinction of the human race.
We have a lot of things happening in the third world, and they'll be talking about funding. That's one thing that will push action, especially in the third world. And that's something that we need to see. Those commitments, we need to start seeing them on the ground. A lot of things have been talking, a lot of programs have been put in place, but no actions yet. So funding is a major thing that will be done.
Art has really changed the climate because all those waste that they throw inside water, including what I'm wearing, all these are waste from pure water. All this is from waste. The bottle of pure water is what we turn to this one.
In the meantime, the art exhibition for climate change aims to provoke innovative responses on enhancing climate resilience, green economic recovery, and low carbon development for Nigeria and around the world.
In the meantime, some environmental experts believe humanity faces the risk of extinction if nothing is done to keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees. They share their thoughts and expectations on the climate change conference and the impact this will have on developing countries.
The COP26 summit is particularly important for countries like Nigeria, who ironically have not contributed that much to the main problem of CO2 emissions. Although in other ways we are contributing, especially through our massive deforestation. However, the industrialized countries, the main producers of the problem, had pledged some time back that they would make several hundreds of billions of dollars available to developing nations like Nigeria for the purpose of adaptation and mitigation of the problem. These funds have been very sluggish in coming, partly because of a very unfortunate lack of accountability from many of those countries when the funds do come.
We are seeing increased temperature, we're seeing floods, and even the big cities in Nigeria are not ready to handle floods. Big cities everywhere in the world basically are being challenged by floods. We've seen wildfires elsewhere in the world, but here we're having increased desertification. And so in good faith, the Nigerian state really needs to recognize the fact that with all this crisis, the world is moving away, and the world will move away from dependence on fossil fuels.
We are passing through a series of one-way doors leading to a precipice, to a catastrophic consequence. So the reality is we've overheated the world's average temperature too much. It's already almost 1.2 degrees above what it had always been when civilization was able to develop. And if we take it beyond the 1.5, which is what we had agreed at the Paris COP, to keep it below 1.5, if we continue this way, we're taking it above the 1.5. And it's between that 1.5 and 2 degrees where we know that it shall become unstoppable and definitely catastrophic.
Imagine sandstorms in northern Nigeria because of poor management of water resources. If the lake Chad dries up, for example, because of insufficient water to recharge the lake, which happens from irrigation and too much extraction of water from the lake and less rainfall. If that happens, we're going to have more crises in the northeast. And then there will be a direct impact on food production. You don't have enough land, you're losing land to desertification, you're losing land to flooding. You're going to have impact on fisheries and on food production, including farming and pastoralism. So we're having a cataclysmic picture of the future. When sea level rises, is bringing salt water into a fresh water system. So that even communities who manage to survive along the coast will not have fresh water for drinking, for other uses.
And now we who are still in the early stages of our development, they want us to transit away. Well, it would have been a lot better if we had deployed the tremendous wealth that came from the fossil fuel. We've been selling oil and gas for quite a long time. And unfortunately, we have not been able to invest the wealth effectively. Unfortunately, we, to a massive extent, have squandered the oil wealth that we had. So as a result, we're still very reliant on that sort of income. But it's not our only income source. We have tremendous other possibilities which definitely will need to be explored, because we have to transit eventually, and hopefully by 2050, to the clean fuels.
We need to invest in tackling desertification. Desertification would happen because of climate variability, but it also happens because of poor management of vegetative cover of our territories. And this is why the Green Belt project that cuts across northern Nigeria is very important in tackling the spread of the desert. But we need to ensure that when government talks about building the Green Wall, the Great Green Wall, which goes across the entire African Sahel, there should be emphasis on indigenous varieties of trees, not exotic trees that require more water, exotic trees that people cannot identify with and would therefore not protect, but trees that help to build an a zone of viable economic activity and that supports the culture and social life of the people.
In the context of
if you want African countries, for instance, to be supportive of the climate change strategies, you need to look at how to give them the justice that will take them out of the bondage of contracts that they have entered into. Don't forget, many of the African countries, they have signed long-term contracts in relation to fossil fuel facilities that are in use. They have to keep to the terms and conditions of these agreements. Many of these agreements were signed with multinationals that have their base in developed nations. So when you start talking about renewable energies, you must be ready to support them to get out of the bondage of those contractual relationships that they have entered.
The two giant rainforests of the world, the Brazilian and the Congo Basin rainforests, are massive absorbers of the CO2. But as we degrade them, and it's going on very, very rapidly, they will now soon become more emitters of the CO2 than absorbers. And that's just one of those tipping points. There's several others with the Arctic ice sheets and so on. So this is why informed people, like the Secretary General of the United Nations, is clearly stating that this is no longer an emergency, which is what he used to call it before. The climate crisis is an emergency. He said it's no longer just an emergency. It's now a code red alert emergency, which is the highest level of emergency that can possibly be designated to a situation.
Everybody has to cut emissions if you have emissions to cut, and so a lot of poor countries don't really have emissions to cut. But then everybody needs to build resilience and mitigation measures. And building resilience means money. And it means investing on those things that will build the capacity of the nations, of territories, of communities to withstand the ravages of global warming.
Look at the kind of thing that just happened in Afghanistan of recent. Those are issues that will distract that country and those who have migration into their country in relation to climate change. So it is easy for us to talk about meeting the challenges of climate change, but there are so many other things surrounding this challenge, surrounding this issue, that if we don't deal with them, it will continue to be more of talk, but less of action.
We're poisoning ourselves. We're on the brink of destroying our children's very future. There's no iota of doubt about that. And part of the problem is we've been in denial of this because it's convenient to deny, and the truth of the situation is inconvenient because it could be damaging to the almighty profit margin. And if you're going to put profit ahead of people and planet, this is what happens. You now jeopardize your children's future. So hopefully reason and good sense and genuine love of our children will prevail.
Whether it's palatable or not, fossil fuels eventually have to be left in the ground. It may not be the easiest thing for people to do. It's just because we can't imagine another way of living. But then if we find the African definition of living well and sell it to the world, the concept like Ubuntu, knowing that we're all interconnected, not just humans, but other species on the earth. Now, once we redefine this and build the pathways, we'll find that the things we believe we cannot do without, we can actually do without. We can change. We are not machines. We are adaptable humans, and we need to be reasonable and sensible.
Still ahead on the show, we take a look at food waste and how it could help decarbonize our planet and also promote a healthy lifestyle. Every living creature on this planet needs food to survive. but more often than not, food is being taken for granted. However, a non-profit organization visited a school in Lagos and distributed free meals to students while sensitizing them on the importance of food to people and the planet.
Food is a basic necessity of life. While the importance of food can't be ignored, about 40% of humanity can't afford a healthy diet. And at the same time, there are concerns on the way we consume, produce and waste food, which is taking a toll on our planet. About 8% of food waste contributes to the global carbon emissions, which causes climate change. In line with its contribution to eliminate hunger and proffer solutions to managing food waste, Nova Diamond Foundation visited a school in Lagos and distributed free meals to students while sensitizing them on the importance of food to people and the planet.
We are here to commemorate the World Food Day with them. We are here to celebrate them. We are here to increase the awareness about hunger in the land. We are here to also ensure that the children can get some adequate nutrition to supplement their existing plan, because malnutrition is a thing again in this part of the world. We are trying as much as possible to eradicate hunger, which is why we are saying don't even waste these foods in the first place. It's not even, a lot of people cannot even feed. So why would you even have so much to eat and then some will not have to go to waste?
Oluwafikayo also mentioned steps to adopt to preserve foods and even vegetables.
We can refrigerate our rice, we can refrigerate our vegetables, we can sun dry our leaves, all our leafy vegetables. We can sun dry them. We can sun dry our ewedu and turn them into powder and cook them, and they are still very good. We can dry our fish, we can dry vegetables and fruits. Basically, we can juice our fruits, our oranges, watermelon. Because really, I know that some of them don't have good shelf life. So we can just turn them into smoothies, into juices, and that way we can even have them, consume them in their old form. Some of the food that goes to waste, if we actually manage this waste properly, they can be used as compost that can even help to grow other food. So it's all boils down to just being intentional about these things, basically.
Some of the pupils here seem to understand the concept of how to manage food waste.
I like to tell them that they should manage the food and they should preserve them, and when they are wasted, they should use them as manure in farms. So in order to create more food, so that there can be more food to avoid shortage and famine in the world.
We can manage our food by refrigerating. When we keep our food inside the fridge, it makes it cooler and even cooler, so we'll be able to eat it when next time we need it.
While World Food Day is targeted at eliminating hunger as part of the Sustainable Development Goals, it is believed that making food choices that will improve our health and reduce food waste would lead to environmental sustainability, which is key to the development of the present and future generations.
In the meantime, environmental conservationist Temitope Okunu shares insights on how we can turn our food waste into gold.
So food waste, just like any other kind of waste, is being generated by, of course, human beings. As population increases, so also does urbanization increases. And we tend to have a lot of food being produced as a result of urbanization, increased urbanization. So there's tendency to always have food waste. So that being established, food waste usually would end up at the dump sites and contributing to a low lot of emissions of methane in the dump site, and that is a very huge part of the greenhouse gases being emitted into the atmosphere, and we're trying to curb that. From your food waste that you have termed waste, it is a resource for me and for several people who have adopted that strategy, that process. Food waste is no longer categorized as waste at home. Food waste is now a resource. Food waste is now something that can be used to grow one's food. Food waste can now be categorized as something that can be used to grow a healthy food for yourself, for your family, and for your society. So the process of making the food waste is what people need to, get used to. I mean, it's really pretty simple steps to achieve that and get your own compost at home. Another aspect is biogas generation. So you can also use your food waste to generate biogas. The difference between composting and biogas is that, for composting, there are specific organic matter that needs to be included in your compost pile. But for biogas, you can use virtually everything you generate at home. And that can produce electricity, it can produce energy, to give you more cooking gas, just as a supplementary gas for your regular cooking gas at home. And it can also be used to power your generator. Let me take my house for an example. So I have this small transparent bowl covered with a covered lid. So what I do is, after I have finished cooking yam, or peeling yams rather, I cut them into pieces, and this is very specific, so that the breakdown process can be faster. So I carry the yam peels and put it in that bowl. When I'm done with the eggshells as well, I rinse it off and then crush it and put it in that same bowl. My pepper, the stalk, the onion wraps and all of that, I put it in a separate. So all of those things would also be kept in the compost bin, the small one in my kitchen. At night, the components of that bin must end up in a larger bin outside. Of course, you don't want, because by tomorrow morning, by the following morning, it will be smelling. So you don't want that. So you put it in the compost bin outside. Now, the compost bin outside, I have 2 larger bins. One for my processed compost. The processed compost means I dump in everything every day and all of that. And then after a month, I leave it to cure. Then the other smaller bin I have outside is the finished compost, which means after 3 months of trying to make my compost, I put them all into that other compost, and then I use it in my garden. Now, how do I encourage people to have gardens, even if we live in a small apartment in Lagos State, an urban city like Lagos? If you look around me here, I have things like paint buckets, used paint buckets. I have sacks, I have bags, grow bags, I have tires, and I have used buckets. All of these things I have used to encourage myself to grow food for myself. You would need to now decide what kind of veggies will I love to eat every day, so those are the kinds of veggies you would now want to grow, and then you have it readily at home. You don't need to buy anything. Flower pots now cost about 3,500. Why would I go, when I can just get a paint bucket, wash it clean, do all the necessary things you need to do for plants to grow in that paint bucket, and add in your soil and your finished compost and grow your food. To have a very good compost, which we call finished compost, it will take you about 3 months or more. But from 3 months, you should be able to get a good compost, from your compost pile. So, and that's taking into consideration some specific factors like your bacteria, moisture level, the air, and how frequently you turn your compost pile. So those are the factors that are responsible for, getting a finished compost in 3 months. As we look to the climate change summit, people are trying to solve a very big problem. And for me, I've always been an advocate of, local solutions, being adopted and solved individually. Because if you bring all of these very big grammar solutions, and nobody actually understands it, it's just going to go. We're not going to be able to achieve anything. But if you bring the solution to a layman's understanding and bring it to, the grassroots, help them to understand how their personal contribution to the solution can matter. That way, collectively, we can achieve, climate action.
And that's about it on this week's edition of Green Angle. Until I come your way next time, remember, together we can build a sustainable world. I am Esther Mokwariola. Bye for now.